Hi, I'm Peter Michael. I'm Managing Director of Michael's Camera, Video and Digital. It's my great pleasure today to introduce Joyce Evans, who's been a long-time friend of ours, mine and ours, and is a practicing photographer to talk to us today.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Peter. Again, for all those who maybe know me or don't know me, it's John Workington here from Michael's Camera, and it's a great pleasure to have Joyce Evans here. Now, it's my first time meeting Joyce, but I've had a chance to do a little preliminary research with her background, and Peter's told me a little bit about Joyce's history, and of course she's a long-standing friend of the Michaels family, and of course a customer of the store. But Joyce brings a wealth of knowledge about the photographic market in the fine art space in Australia. So I'll just give a very quick rundown of what I understand. Joyce told me just a little bit before we started that she basically got the photographic urge at about age 19 with the gift of a Leica camera. So that's always very interesting. And of course, Michael's is a Leica dealer, and we've got the Leica boutique here on level 1. So we're big fans of the Leica rangefinder cameras, and of course all their entries into the modern digital market. So that's a very exciting story as well, and we'll probably dive into Joyce's background in her younger days. But what we feel is of most interest to our customers today is that later in life, Joyce started a gallery that was also a bookstore. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that was on Chapel Street, or sorry, no, Church Street in Richmond.
Yep, Church Street, Richmond, corner of Church and Gibb Street in Richmond.
And that was in about the mid-1970s, I understand?
Yep.
So a lot of photographers here at Michael's are keen amateurs, they're enthusiasts. We often get ourselves hung up into the area of equipment, and then we start talking about technique, and then of course we're always interested in print here because of course print is a big part of the Michael's experience, but of course we certainly understand that print has to compete with the online format. So many people today present their work in an online fashion, but after the print becomes maybe that final stage for a photographer, and that's the exhibition. And of course, there's been this long-running argument since the beginning of photography, way in the, back in the 1800s. I guess the beginnings of the modern daguerreotype were about 1845 or something around there. And it was, is photography art? And of course, that's where you found yourself sitting in the mid-1970s with the creation of your gallery. And then, as you told me, your rediscovery of photography from a personal point of view towards the end of the 1970s. So what I wanted to just start our conversation off with is a little bit, is this classic question: is photography art? What's your opinion on it? Obviously, you're a photographer and you're in that space, but how do we still, deal with this overriding question of, is photography art? What's your opinion?
I think it's a question that's past its use-by date.
Excellent.
To be quite frank. I mean, what is art? Nobody knows what art is. I mean, Duchamp says if you put a toilet in a gallery and you call it art, it's art. And since then, to define anything as art is purely and simply a matter of saying, I have created this, I'm putting it in an art gallery, I say it is art, I work as an artist, and therefore it is art. Now, we then join the actual creation and the artist to the market, and that was the function that I tried to fulfill. In other words, to create an environment in Melbourne where the best photography in the world could be seen, both in original form and also in books, postcards, posters, film. And the key thing is that I had had a career of collecting art since, I bought my first artwork when I was 17, a Rembrandt. Wow. In New York. A second generation Rembrandt, the Germans had helped the Dutch be relieved of some Rembrandt plates, and they got a very fine engraver to print them up for them. And then the Americans continued with this and said any student could buy one for $5, which I did. So I still have Christ on the Way to Erasmus. But the key thing is that this question of what is art really has been blown open. It's not anymore the relevant point. What the point is it A, good? And on the basis of that, is it acceptable? Is it what belongs in an art gallery? Is it something that you will want to buy? And that what will limit you in the buying once you decide you like it is whether you can afford it or not. You know, I would love to have a collection of Sebastian Salgado's work, for instance. I came into the market a bit late on that one. But so we all have things that we have seen that have been done by others who are our peers or they're producing in our same time. And of course the cost is one of the determinants of whether you will buy something or not. But for me, I wanted to show the best photography that I could find of people live, dead, young, old, established, non-established. So I would have in the gallery Max Dupain, who at that stage I felt was established, but we were still establishing him internationally. And I presume the audience knows who Max is. The Sunbaker is such a famous image that I think it exists and it is known as a great Australian icon. So we have someone like Max, and then we had a young, cheeky, overeducated, 23-year-old, I think he was, who was working in a bookshop and who was producing work whilst at Parantech. And Athol Smith rang me up and said, he was the head of the school at Parantech at the time, and said, have a look at this young man's work and see what you think about it. We hung it within a week, 2 weeks maybe. We had to get it framed. And of course, knowing Bill Henson, it had to be framed exactly the way he wanted them. And what we did in those days is we actually framed all of our photographers' work, no charge. No wonder we went broke. And we charged a huge 40% to the photographer. We framed their work, we mounted the work, we paid for all the advertising, we did everything because we felt that photography and photographers needed that sort of assistance. It was not very good business, so we didn't last long. My father had died, and he had very sweetly left me a fair stack of bread, which I got through quite quickly. So it pays to have a wealthy parent, particularly if you want to do things that are not necessarily viable. In the meantime, Clive Everett had done fine arts at Sydney University the same time as I did, and we'd become friends. Now, Clive Everett was the nephew of Herbert, what was he the minister of? He was the head of the Labor Party anyway, and could well have become a Prime Minister, but he didn't. So Doc Everett, who was, anyway, Clive's uncle, he was the uncle. Clive was the nephew. But Clive was a barrister, and he handled a lot of the criminal law in Sydney. And he saw, well, he had a gallery for photography. No, not for photography, for Aboriginal art. And I went up to see him, and we talked about what I should do with the gallery and so on and so forth. And he said, forget about making any money out of it. You will make money out of what you put aside and sell in 10 years' time. So I was also advised by James Mollison, who was the director of the National Gallery of Australia. He also said, keep the work. You won't make many money out of it at this stage, but you may in future.
Well, at that stage, did the National Gallery have much in its photographic assets?
Yes. Oh, yes. They had an exceptional collection. They didn't buy it from me because the guy who was advising them in what they should buy didn't. I wasn't part of his group. Okay, so you had to know who was who and sort of get it right.
So just like today, connections were very, very important.
Yeah.
A lot of it is based on who you know.
Oh, well, I knew them all, but some of them like you and some of them don't. I was the rich bitch that knew nothing.
So if you were to do it all over again, what do you think would make the gallery space more viable? What were the critical issues to getting works on the wall, getting them into the hands of people who will obviously pay an appropriate price, reward the photographer accordingly, and still have enough left for you? Obviously, your one point about putting some away for future, that's like the aging wine principle, which is very good advice. What are the tricks to making the gallery business viable?
I really don't know.
That's a valid answer as well.
What I do know, however, is that when you're in love with something or someone, you don't always behave logically. And when I was in Basel at the art fair, when I first became aware of photography as an art form, I literally fell in love. I had the shaky knees, I couldn't talk, I couldn't breathe, I didn't even want to drink alcohol. It was just one of those things. This just blew me. I had been involved in some form of art since I was about 17. And I had never consciously seen photography as anything except a record. Mm-hmm. The photographs that we all have and take. And the excitement of finding this art form and then meeting someone like Harry Lunn, who was he was sort of like the father of the establishment internationally. So there was, he was in Washington, then we had in Los Angeles, we had, I knew, and I have to think of a lot of names, I'll forget them. And I've got to get hold of him. G. Ray Hawkins. Now, G. Ray Hawkins, we've been talking a little while ago and then I became unwell, but nobody's ever written the beginning of photography at that time, what was actually happening. And when they found me and I came in and said, look, I want to do something. I don't know what I want to do, but I want to do something about photography. I'm in love with it. And they said, well, you're in Australia. We don't have anyone in Australia. Why don't you start a gallery? And I said, but I've never done anything like that before. And they said, oh, it doesn't take much. We didn't know anything a few years ago. Go for it. We'll help you. And they did. They sent me exhibitions. I got an original At-J exhibition. I got, oh look, I got so many contacts and everything else from them. They were amazing. And there was I should have a list of them here, but in Texas there was Cronin Gallery. In New York there was, there were 3 galleries there, and I'm never quite sure which was the main one. But there were various galleries in different parts of the States, and I went and met all of them. In the meantime, we had the Australian Centre for Photography in Sydney with, who started that now? Anyway, he ended up by becoming a curator and wrote a couple of books about photography in Australia and did all the right things, but he got burnt out like so many other people did. His name will come to me in a minute. But he was also helpful. When I came to Melbourne, I went and spoke to Rennie Ellis. I'd met Ian Turner in London, and he said, look, Rennie started a gallery, he'll help you, he's a good bloke. And I said, well, if he's got a gallery, why should I start one? She said, because the more we have going, the better it will be. And the rule of starting something like this is you should find where he is and move him right beside him so that the clients have got choice. So you should have 2 camera shops next to each other, and then everybody will come to that area. And I was in Richmond and he was in South Yarra, so it was pretty close. But and it was so exciting because there was Parantech and that mob of people who were working creatively. And there was a great ignorance that needed to be satisfied, and I reckon just because of that, that's why we had to have a bookshop. I mean, my knowledge had come from books, and most people's the same. I mean, we weren't in the digital age, so that was what really counted. And it was so special. The work that I was looking at and the things that I was allowed to bring in, I mean, name a name, and I was able to see it and bring it in, meet the people. I remember meeting Linda Connor, and gosh, who else was there? There were so many. You think who are some of your favourite photographers of that 1970s, 80s period? Do you have one? No?
I think Ken Duncan.
Hmm?
It was Ken Duncan. Ken Duncan would have been in the 80s, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Yep. And he's still running, of course. I mean, Ken, possibly one of the modern era, one of the biggest names in photography, because of course he's transcended from selling photography in gallery space, but he's done album covers, so he's managed to get into pop culture. You know, some of the most famous.
Well, that was a major form for so many of the other photographers. What's her name? Who did all the covers and did that amazing photograph of Demi Moore. Pregnant.
Annie Leibovitz.
Yeah, Annie Leibovitz started in the album cover.
And some of her most famous works have been magazine covers.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, managed to elevate the magazine cover to fine art.
Absolutely.
And of course, that's where photography's been so powerful, and that it's transcended, some of the conventional boundaries, where it's not just something that is, to be framed and to be on an individual's wall. It can be a mass market appeal item. And of course, so many of these famous photographers have had poster editions. I mean, later in life, of course, Ansel Adams great success as posters and calendars.
Oh, yes.
You know, so, and of course that's one of the beauties of photography, which again...
Moonlight over Hernandez. You could get it in about 50 different forms.
Exactly, and I think maybe that is one of the reasons why in the historical age, there was always this question about, is photography art, where we started our discussion, because photography had the one thing which of course paintings didn't have, the ability to rapidly duplicate. And I think maybe that's why there was a pressure to say, oh, that isn't, because it can be mass duplicated.
Well, I don't know, the print medium...
but of course there were lithographs as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The printing medium has been going for a long, long time. And so that reproducing the artwork is not at all uncommon, and it's not all that new.
And of course, as we know in the world of painting,
but it's quicker and easier with photography.
Yes, and of course, painting, one of the classic ways for hundreds and hundreds of years people have studied is they've duplicated. And of course, this is why we sometimes have these questions of authenticity with respect to paintings, because so many people copied the masters.
Sure.
And some of the masters didn't really, you know, some of their earlier works weren't easily attributed to them. So it's an interesting thing. And of course, photography is still a very young art form. I mean, it wasn't until the box brownie, you know, in the beginnings of the 1900s, that an individual could afford a small camera.
Sure.
And so that's only 2017, so 117 years ago. I mean, oil painting's been around for a heck of a lot longer than that.
Yep.
Yeah, and of course cave art, well, that goes back, well, I don't even, what are the oldest cave paintings? Millions upon millions of years. So art has been with us for a long time.
Talking about cave paintings, this is what I absolutely love. Now, with Aboriginal art and these cave paintings, somebody is always delegated to be the person who keeps the paintings in good order. So the reason that a cave painting has lasted for 1,000 years is because they have been maintained and added to. And what was his name? Oh, Bobby Namira from Owen Pelly. His job was to do one set of caves, and he used to sort of paint them up and sort of see that they were kept in good order. And so because he has done that, you assume now that it's not a sacred cow that never gets touched. And so you ask yourself, what is an original work? And there you sort of move into such interesting phases. You know, if you look at it, what is original? Is it original if it comes off the negative? Is it original if it's made at the time of the shooting of the negative? What is the actual original? Now, if I talk to any photographer, I go into a dark room, or I even work in using digital form. The cost of materials, inks, etc., and time and storage all come into the picture. Now, you're all photographers. When you get a absolutely top of the tree negative or file, how many do you make at the time? How many prints do you make? 1? 5? 20? 100?
Wouldn't be that many.
One?
Probably about
One or a duplicate, yeah, one or
Yeah.
two.
1 or 2?
One or
Right.
two.
It's still the same. It doesn't matter whether it's easy to produce 100. Where the heck are you going to store it? I've still got stuff that I've done I haven't got around to signing because I haven't sort of taken the time to sit down and sign 50 prints that I've got that I haven't signed yet and I haven't properly titled. And I take bets that each one of you photographers here have exactly the same thing. So when you talk about value and originality, I think that what is original is what I say is original. If I sign it, and if I remember that there were 4 made at the time, I'll put 1 of 4 and the date. So in this particular edition, they're 1 of 4. And that's it. Now, if you want as a seller, and I've had to be the seller for other people's work, if you want as a seller to turn around and say, well, those photos were made 10 years ago, and now I've got this lot, okay, what am I going to price them at? And this is where it becomes dicey. How do you price the photos, the 4 photos you made 10 years ago, as compared to the 4 photos you made today? In fact, the one that you made today, knowing the quality of digital reproduction, is often a much better interpretation than the one you made 10 years ago. Because at that stage you were learning how to use the technology. And now, by this time, you're pretty well a master of it. Maybe. So, pricing. How do you go on it? And the same thing is, what does the market accept? If you really want it, you'll pay for it. If you don't really want it, you won't. If you can't afford it. Look, when I had the gallery, there were 2 instances. One in particular, this lass came in and said, I have always wanted a Max Dupain photograph. And I hear you've got financial problems and you're thinking of closing, and I love this place. I want to buy a Max Dupain. I've sold my car. She lived in Geelong. I've sold my car and I've got, what was it, $2,000. It was a second-hand car. Would you be able to give me a Max Dupain photograph for $2,000? And I said, no problem. You know? So we sat down and we went through the lot, and I can't remember if she got a Sunbaker or not, but she got a Max Dupain and she was very happy with it. And people will do anything if they fall in love, you know? And that's the thing where art comes in. Art, to my mind, is where somebody creates something that other people want. They really want them. They recognise its quality. They recognise it has a certain magic that they themselves as photographers aren't quite able to make.
Well, that brings up a very interesting point, and I wanted to lead the conversation into this sort of area, but in this example that you've just given us, you know, the prospective customers come in and they've talked to you and they've given you the name. So it's the principal issue is, I want a work by Max Dupain.
Yep.
So it's not a photograph at that stage, it's a work by the artist.
Yep.
So now to a younger artist who's just starting out, who doesn't have a name yet, there's obviously a process that one has to go through. And sometimes there's a little bit of luck involved, obviously, a little who you know, and you know what, you know, the chance encounters, and you know, maybe meeting a person such as yourself that maybe can get them to that stage where they get the works on a wall where they can be viewed. But what are the sort of the key things that that a young photographer, or certainly in the industry, they don't have to be young in age, but that a person who's looking to get into that space, to become a name, to be able to present works in a gallery, what are the sort of the key steps along the way? You know, the issues that I'm sort of thinking about are...
So we're now talking about the photographer, not the collector.
Well, obviously, before it ever is collected, there has to be the works.
Yep.
So, but if your aim, and not everyone's ever going to become collected, it's not everybody gets to become a rock star either. There's lots of great musicians, we know this. There's lots of great photographers. But if their ambition is to move down that road, you know, the things I'm thinking about are, is it the story that they're telling, or is it their own story? Is it the works as part of a greater collection, and that collection as part of a complete you know, history of a certain artist? Because obviously when you have a solo exhibition, there's a set number of works, maybe 20 or 30, or maybe even a smaller one, maybe 5 or 10. And one would hope that the works have a structure to them. There's a cohesive message or something. I mean, and so these are the things I'm thinking about. How does someone who might be watching us on YouTube, this video, saying, well, here's an expert who had a gallery, who knew all these famous artists, who had the ability to take their works and get them into the hands of collectors. I'd like to be doing that. What are the simple stages, or not, what may not be simple, but what are the stages that a young artist needs to be thinking about to get to that point? I mean, we can safely assume that they're at the point where they're a photographic artist, they're mastering their camera, they have an idea of what they'd like to share, you know, a story they want to tell, a type of image, you know, be that, you know, there's so many different types. But how do they get over that hump? How do they get in touch with someone such as yourself and bridge that gap to having someone believe in them? You know, obviously they've got to believe in themselves.
I think what you've just said is critical. You have to believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, and there's a type of believing in yourself. It's not just coming in and being boisterous and saying, I'm the best. It's like, as I say, Bill was a fair to deal with, because he knew what he wanted, how he wanted it, and there was no mucking about. In fact, I went back to London a few years ago, and I saw Sue Davis, who started the Photographers Gallery in London. And the first thing she said as I walked in the door, and she said, how is our temperamental genius? Now, she had handled, through me, Max and Bill at the Photographers Gallery in London, and there was no doubt about who we were speaking. And Max was the sort of person who would say, what do you think I should do about this? He was very confident about himself as a photographer, but he knew that as a somebody selling his work outside of the commercial world, he needed help. Whereas Bill was just, this is it. It sells, it doesn't sell. That's it. It's got to be like this. No compromise, no discussion, no nothing. You know, if it didn't sell, he didn't care. I mean, he did, but he didn't. You know what I mean? He was just so temperamental genius, arrogant. But he wasn't arrogant, you know. You think of this sort of thing as being arrogant, but there's a sort of a confidence in what you are doing and an inability to compromise, a refusal to compromise. And I think that this generation of youngsters are very, very confusing to my generation, because as a group they are much, much more self-confident, in one way but not in another. It's a different way of being self-confident, but I find that so many of the youngsters, they know what they're doing, they've worked it out, and they'll do it regardless. They won't compromise. I'm now talking about the people who are dedicated and so on. There's always people that are, you know, I remember one person came to me once and had about 4 different bodies of work and said, I've come to you to find out which will sell. And they were all very, very different. And I turned around and said, I don't think I can help you. I mean, this isn't the way it works. You know, sort of, we didn't get anywhere. I just didn't want to talk to him, really. Not when he had that attitude. He had to be able to say, this is what I've produced, this is what I believe in. And that's the first thing you've got to have, is belief in yourself. And when you have that, you can sort of walk in and be bombastic, or you can walk in and be quiet, but whatever it is, that belief in yourself comes through. And that's the most convincing thing you can ever have.
Okay.
And so it's, maybe I've diverted, I'm not sure.
That's all right. So let's just assume now we've got our example photographer. They've got belief in themselves. They've got maybe a small body of work. Now it's time to find a gallery, and we've got to get the gallery to believe in them, because the gallery needs to make money at the end of the day.
Can I stop you there? I don't believe that's where you start. I think it starts where you have a peer group and you talk to your mates and you go and you show your work to people who you respect and you find out as much as you can about who you are, because you've been producing something and now it's produced, or you're 3/4 of the way down the road. You've got to know what you're going to do with it. And a lot of people don't know that. It's a different ball game. I mean, I've produced X, where is the market? Do I do what my assistant Mads does, join an international group that puts large-scale images up on the wall in the street? And they don't really care about whether it sells or doesn't sell. They want the message to come out. And they've just decided that the whole art game is too difficult, and they'll just produce work and put it out in the street. You know, and so you've got so many different ways of being now as an artist. You know, you earn a living, and unfortunately, you can't use your expenses in producing this work as a tax deduction, because you have to earn $20,000 a year in order to get any sort of tax deductions as an artist, which is one of the big things that all artists should be fighting against. You should be able to be an artist because you say you are, you know? But and there comes a time where you turn around and you've been doing this sort of work and being paid for it, and that's fine, but you might decide that you want to talk about something that's important to you. And that becomes what you spend the next 6 months doing. And I suppose then there's the others that sort of just go somewhere because the message that is there has to be told. I mean, I belong to a group called Degree South, and I got fired from there because even though I said when they started, what you want with a fat old lady who's never been shot at, and they sort of thought I had some qualities, but then they decided to focus on war, and they decided that dead animals and dead people on the road and so on and so forth were not equivalent to war. And I can see their point. So they put Ashley Gilbertson into my job as the 9th photographer in the Degree South group, and he's good. He fits their criteria, and that's fine. I didn't like getting fired though. But you know, what the heck? I helped get the thing off the ground, as did all the others. And so I had my role and then thing. But in the meantime, I'd like to think about talking about what makes A, the person the photographer, but B, what makes a photographer, what makes the photograph important. What is it that makes a particular photograph important? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, all of these here. What makes these important?
The story.
The feeling.
Right, the story. What else?
Yeah, the feeling.
Hmm?
The feeling.
The feeling.
The audience?
The what?
The audience.
The audience. Hmm? Anyway,
But must have told me the story though. That would tell that.
it's an interesting thing because I have a real battle with the whole photography world at the moment because of the lack of titling associated with the image in most gallery scenes. I feel that Untitled is my favourite horror. I feel that it's a total cop-out, that if you take a photograph, well, there's Uluru here, right? That's one of my keynote images. Do you want to pick it up?
Yeah, it'll be in the broadcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it comes through.
Oh, I see. They can see it from...
Yes, they can.
Oh, how clever.
So this is the picture that's on your homepage, and obviously you can see the URL there.
Yeah.
So anybody can go and check this out.
Yeah. Now, I always just call it Uluru and the date. I don't think it needs more than that, but not to say what it is, I find is a lack of respect. It's not giving it a name. It doesn't matter what it is. Peter Michaels. Now, Peter may not like to have his name used, and I will respect that. But I will give it a title such as, and I'll ask him about it, Man on Brighton Beach, or at Brighton Beach, or Man eating at Topo Gigio's. I will give it some form of identity, because I think that not to do that is the height of arrogance. I have taken this picture, sometimes without permission. I mean, hello Uluru, can I take your picture?
That brings up a whole other issue in Australia.
There is another issue about that. And if they put me in jail, they'll put me in jail, I don't care. I did it before it all became an issue. I mean, it's what's the date? That one is 70, no, it was 80, 86, 87. Yeah, 86, 87. Anyway, but...
Well, I think we certainly hit on a very important thing. So the value in titling your work.
Yep.
Yeah. And
not just the value, but the importance. Because I think it's a type of respect. I got to it with Bill. He had 16 photos in the first show that we had, all of a young man. Untitled number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Somebody rang up, wanted to buy one. It was the fourth from the left. There were two faces and they were both so similar. It was almost impossible. So it had to be, at the least, boy 1 and boy 2. You know? If you don't want his name used, don't use it. But call it something, not bastard. You know? I get so annoyed. And I rang him up and I said, I'm sick of it. Someone wants to buy one of your bastards. When are you going to give it a name? And this is the way I feel when I come into an exhibition and I find all of these photographs on the wall with no title. Now, when they have no title, it's because we're slackjacks. I've done it, I've forgotten to do it. Panic of getting everything up on the wall, framed and so on and so forth. I sent the photo off and they put it into a mount. I wasn't around. They put it into a glass frame and then we had to unframe it for me to sign it. We didn't get around to doing it. Naughty. I accept the fact that I was wrong. And I just sort of feel it's so, so sad that we don't have that respect, you know?
Now, what about mounting? What are your opinions on, you know, again, we're talking about this fictitious artist who wants to venture down this road. Obviously, there's a cost of putting on an exhibition, and either they're going to be, you know, giving a very large slice of their sales to, you know, the gallery, or they might have to pay for placement. Might have to have everything already mounted, ready to roll. And of course, there's a huge cost. The labor of beautiful framing is very expensive in Australia.
Of course it is.
Is it worthwhile, in your opinion, for someone to display their work printed but not mounted?
I think that we do what we can. If it's not mounted, if it's just tacked up on the wall, if it's got a large enough border, and we can cover the ideal thing is what some places do now. I think Monash does it. They put a magnet in the wall, and then they have a magnet over the image, and there'll be a little mark from that magnet left on the paper. Too bad. As long as it's not on the image itself, or ideally not too close to, these are part of the game. But you know, mounting is it's like finishing something off, putting it in a safe place, enabling it to be handled without being damaged. There are 101 things that go into it. I went mad about 3 or 4 years ago. I did these photographs of Professor Bernard Smith in the nude, and I felt they were very important because they were talking about something that's close to me as an old lady. His reason for wanting to be photographed in attic poses in the nude was, as a 92-year-old, he felt that he was still an entire male and entitled to be treated as an entire male, not a eunuch. And he had remarried after his wife had died, and his wife, who was about the same age as he, or a little bit younger, said, "Oh no, I'm past all that hanky-panky stuff," and left him without an appropriate partner. So he was a bit uptight about that. He felt that he was being put on the shelf when he didn't need to be and didn't want to be. And so this body of work was partly his revolt against being eunuchized. And as I say, I was sort of about 10 years younger, but nevertheless sort of, look, when one of my friends asked me if I'd stay with her husband and look after him in their country place, and stay the night and a couple of days with him, looking at, just being with him, I thought, well, I've arrived now, you know, I really have. I'm no longer dangerous. But we all have needs as human beings. We protect small youngsters, you know, from the world of sex. And we think we're protecting old people when we sort of put them on the shelf. and don't ask them what they feel. And there's a beautiful, beautiful film of which finishes with the couple. He is in an old age home and he sneaks back into the bedroom and sort of lies beside his wife of many years. And they're just holding hands and being together, and both die. And there's that sense of contentment and being where you're supposed to be. And I thought it was very beautiful, and it faced something that that is important. Sexual expression is not just for sort of vibrant youngsters, it's also part of aging as well. And yeah, so I think it's one of those things that we can look at it and talk about as photographers. I don't think there's anything we can't look at and talk about as photographers. It's the way we do it that counts. I mean, there's a lot of crudity in the world, which I find distasteful sometimes. But that's just me, being a bit of a, you know, up your nose business. But generally, I think we have a right to express the beauty and the sadness and otherwise of all sorts of ages, of all sorts of animals, of all sorts of places, with some sort of respect for the people and the place that we're photographing. You know. Anyway, I'd rather like to look at some photographs that I have made and sort of ask you and me to say, what do you think? See, for me, a photograph has to have a story that can be told many times, and not always the same way. And something like this particular photograph has taught me a lot about what photography is about. There are things here that have taught me about the rock itself. You know, there's this sweep here. It's a sort of a type of poetry. The sky, it's totally, or almost totally negative as compared to the rock. This here, where we are looking there and there at what look like the scars, the scarification that goes onto an Aboriginal person when you go through law. And that's how the body is scarred. And so here is a cave. It's a very important cave. This thing here I'm not quite sure about.
Just back up for a second. What is the scale of this image? How this cave area that we're looking at, how large is that?
Okay, there's a person here.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah.
So that's another thing, you know, we have to dive right in before we even get a sense of scale. And of course,
this is only a very small section of the rock. A very, very small section. And for some reason or other it has, for me, it has a lot of story. And I mean, see, this line here, see that line there? Mm-hmm. And then this intersecting here, there's energy points. And so it's something that's very, very very small in the sense of it doesn't seem to have many story points. But because it's so open, you can make any story you like. Anyway, so to me, that's one of the things that makes an image work. You know, like we're looking here, for instance, I still find that here, I like the busyness of it. This one here I've seen before.
I'm not too sure if we can point one of the cameras around to
anyway.
show that. It's a laneway picture. I believe that's De Graves Lane in the city.
Yeah. But I mean, I can look at my own work, and how can I look at that? Can somebody help me to look at what's here?
Well, I must admit, what I like.
How do I open this so that I can look at other work?
Oh, do you want me to bring up another website or?
Yeah, I just want to look at my own work and talk about it, because you know all the rest of it's just.
So we've got your all categories.
It's just talk.
Should we go to desert landscapes?
Whatever you like.
Okay. Assuming that works. There we go. It's coming up.
Okay. So there's the rock.
So give it a sec.
Uluru.
Should be coming in. Give it a sec.
Okay. This one here, I've been really, really sparse with. It's 2 different visits to the rock, and this is me where I've sort of done a lot of work on this particular image and sort of brought up stories and elements. But here, can you see these?
Yeah, they're coming in on the feed.
Right. Okay. On the left-hand side image, what I was searching for was a landscape with no footprints, and then I put my own foot in it, which was very naughty. But I was looking for a space. This is Uluru landscape, and there are always tourists everywhere. So it was a bit of a hunt. And then that was I actually searching for, and I'm using the Hasselblad as compared to the Pentax. But here is the pair to it, and there's the rock. And what I wanted to talk about is how, in terms of the land itself, the rock was very tiny. It's, you know, it's eventually going to sort of go into the land itself and become part of the soil. And where is its importance? Its importance is in its nowness. And then again, if you look at the horizon line, you see how there are little tufts growing up there and here. And if you notice, see here again, there's this very, very gentle, I love the Baroque. So there's this very, very gentle movement, and the trees on the horizon, which if you drive in the country or walk in the country, that horizon is constantly there. You know, not when you're in a forest, of course, or in the city perhaps, you've got a different thing, but this horizon is so incredibly beautiful. Anyway, so I went back and shot this, obviously 4 years later, isn't it?
Yeah, it must be.
5 years later.
87, 92.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and so having done this sort of thing, I went back and decided to play. Mm-hmm. And that's the beauty of photography, it enables you to play with an idea, with a concept. Okay, let's go next.
Okay, let's go back.
So there are words there if somebody wants to read. This is later again. This is when I went to Oodnadatta, which is a Aboriginal community, one of the largest of the Aboriginal communities. It has a large hospital and police presence, many, many things. But this is going to a place called the Rain Dreaming, which is just out of Oodnadatta. And I went with a member of Melbourne University staff who was doing the contacts. And I said, have we permission to go and take photos? And she said, yes, I've got permission. And I said, for me to do it? She said, yes. So the next day, I went to the traditional owner, and I had it all as digital files in the computer. And I said, I took these photographs, and I want to make sure that none of them are that all of them are able to be used and sold to the National Library, who is my major client, or to other people. And he said, I didn't give you permission. And we had what looked like a standoff. He was going to say, no, you can't use them. And then I thought about something that kind of works sometimes. And I looked at him and I said, well, my name is such and such, and I'm older than you, and you must show me respect. And he said, no, I'm not, you're not, I am. I said, how old are you? And I was 2 years older than him. I got it. So we all burst out, because they have marvellous sense of humour. And we all burst out laughing, and it all worked out fine. It's amazing when your back's to the wall how you think of stuff. And photographers are always stuck with their back to the wall. I don't know whether you've ever done a job where something hasn't happened that you've had to think a bit quickly, and so on. So this one here is just a small remnant of a fire, and there. This is the rain dreaming, and when you come into these things here, these rocks here have this amazing feeling of having been painted. You know, they don't, look at that. It looks like an amazing painting, doesn't it?
Yes.
Look at the lines that are here, and they're like Aboriginal art. And so you can say to yourself, wait a second, with this sort of landscape, how could you not be influenced and become a painter? Mm-hmm. And then you've got these shapes and forms, and look at these marvellous lines that are there. And here again, the same sort of strong design features that nature has done. That's a strong one too.
Well, now this leads us into another interesting thing, as we were talking a little bit earlier about, you were saying what frustrates you with some of the younger photographers these days, and you know, we talked about the naming of works. What has hit us, and of course these works here, you've said you've shot on digital, but obviously you've been around from the early days of film.
Oh yeah.
You've now migrated into the transition. Maybe you still use a little bit of film. You've got a digital camera with you right here. You were just playing with it a little bit at the beginning. But of course, digital has been this great, it's been a huge change in the world of imaging.
It's out of chemistry.
Yeah, it has enabled everyone to be a photographer.
Yes.
And there's some great things to do with that, and from some of the commercial ramifications, the other problem, which everybody says everybody's a photographer. And of course now, and here we are looking at some of your works on a digital tablet device, which is for all intents and purposes destroyed the book market. And of course you had a bookstore.
Sure.
We're in exciting times. We don't really know where it's all going to lead.
Democratization of the image, which started, of course, with Kodak. Mm-hmm. It's really just an expansion of, you know, you take the photo, we do the rest. Now it's you take the photo and who does the best?
Yeah, and of course we have these.
And it's changed our relationship to each other. I mean, the instant photograph, I mean, I keep on saying to my granddaughter, the only photos I see of you are like this with your friends. You all look pissed. And, you know, you're boring because it's so predictable. There's nothing of the quiet. And anyway, that's what I tell my grandchildren.
you know, you brought up the old Kodak line. You take the picture, we do the rest. Of course, you know, now the rest is all this digital, and it can be disseminated nearly instantly. And if one is lucky, it could go viral, and all of a sudden, you know, it could be news.
Oh,
Depends
yes.
on what the picture is. And we've certainly seen in the cases of many newspapers, they are not seeing the value in having professional photographers on staff anymore because they feel they can just go out and use citizen journalists. So a lot of things have changed in our industry.
The real estate agents used to be a major source of income. Wedding photographers, all of them. They're shaky now.
Yeah.
They still exist, but they're not as strong as they used to be. They can't sort of charge the same amount because you have our Uncle Joe who's got a great camera, and of course the camera goes out and takes the photo, doesn't it? Not Uncle Joe.
Well, that's a problem of perception. You know, the average person believes it is the camera. You know, whenever they see a great work, you know, what camera took it? You know, it's not who took it or, you know, what went into it. It's, you know, oh, you must have a great camera because that's a great photograph. And it's good for us as a photography store because we need to sell cameras, of course. But yes, photography has been the ultimate democratization of it. I think the classic stats are every year there are more photos taken than in all of history up to that year. And it just keeps going on and on. So, which means there are more and more people that are interested in taking pictures. Doesn't mean they're taking pictures that are worth talking about.
And can they write?
Well, that's another thing. Can they write? Because you need to have a little bit of written word is good to go with these.
Yeah.
But that also leads us up here. Oh, before you say.
That's right. Where is it?
It's right here.
Oh.
Oh, I reach over you. Sorry about that.
That's my blind side.
Here. But we're lucky at Michael's Camera here in that there are so many people that are discovering photography because of, it might have been a smartphone camera, and now they're discovering film photography. So there is an interest in this, and people are rediscovering print who haven't printed for years because, of course, the physical print has a certain appeal to it. It's a lot different for us to handle a print or to even handle a fine art book than this electronic device. This gives us a good, maybe a taste of what the picture is, you know, but to have it in print, in big, or on your wall with appropriate lighting, with that beautiful frame, that nice border, maybe that title, that signature on it, you know, that's now a work to behold to pass down to subsequent generations. How do I pass down the tablet, you know, to my grandchildren? I mean, you turn it off, it's gone. You know, I break it, it's gone. So there are so many other areas that are at some point they're sort of being lost or they're being disregarded. Here, we'll get into those all categories. But we're still seeing that people are excited about this. Ah, the activism. Okay. Oh, sorry, I've just lost you there.
That's all right.
Back. Oops.
Where are we?
There we go.
Now, this is going up on the other things, is it?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this is a really funny story. I found an album that I'd put together, and in the old days, getting prints made was expensive, so you had your contacts. So these are all from contacts, you know, 35mm contact prints, and it goes to show what you can actually do if somebody knows what they're doing when they're scanning. So these are photographs that I took when I was an activist, and this is sort of student marching, and Melbourne Uni, I was a member there. This is one of the trade unions, and look at them. I mean, I just love what these sort of things tell you. I mean, the hat, the coat, you know, the suit. Now these are all workers' unions. They're not, they're blue-collar workers, and they're all sort of dressed up to go to church.
And of course, they have a much different meaning today than they did at the time when you took them, because, you know, how many other people were out there documenting this at the time? I mean, photography was expensive, and just as you said, you know, you weren't able to do large prints at the time. You had your contact sheets.
Yeah.
So these might be the only record that exists of that event.
Yep. Mm-hmm. It's probably here. I don't think anyone else was taking this. John Clendenin, who became a lecturer in philosophy. Jill Warwick, who was a producer of It Could Be You, an early television program. Mm-hmm. These are Greeks in their costumes, you know, and these, oh dear, I've got their names down somewhere, I must put that in. Remembering people's names is not necessarily the easiest thing. He became a judge, Bernie Rector. Don't know who this bloke is. Anyway, so there we are. Then, so this is basically my interest in documenting goes way, way back. I just felt the need to tell a story. And it was so important. What's this one? Oh, this one's fun. This is, every year we used to have National Union of Australian University Students used to have a conference, and I don't know if they still do. Does anyone here know if there's still annual conferences for National Union of Australian University Students? You're all university students, but you don't know.
No.
You have an SRC or the equivalent?
Bachelor?
Hmm?
What is SRC?
Student Representative Council?
Oh, at the uni, yeah, there is one.
Yeah. Well, they used to meet, and different clubs and societies would send their representatives to it, and then there was always stuff happening. So every summer back, we'd go somewhere to a different state, and this is what happened. We went to South Australia, to Adelaide, just out of Adelaide. This bloke here, Dickie Woolcott, who's wearing sort of the blue singlet of the working class, became one of Australia's leading diplomats. This is a bunch of women. We were all living in these tents. There's me in the shorts. And there's Edward, oh, that's badly done. I have to redo that. His name's not done right. He was my boyfriend at the time. He's very cute. He's dead now, which is a nuisance. It's very sad.
Because he had a car.
Oh, that's great. I like that. So this is, both of those became professors. Lottie Nettle, what's her married name? I've forgotten. Peter Glow. And then he was a pharmacist. And this is us. So this is really bad. There was myself, Jill Warwick, and Val Groves. Not only were we smoking, not only were we wearing shorts and nothing on the top, but we were drinking. And drinking not in the ladies' bar. And see the bloke in the back? This is what I love about documentary photography. They're all absolutely hacking it. They're laughing themselves silly. And this is a a photograph taken by a newspaper photographer.
So you might have been outed, might have been published.
Oh, we were. that came out of the newspaper.
Yeah.
It was front page. Terrible behaviour. This is, again, all of us. We hitchhiked back to Melbourne, and there were, I think, 14 of us that all hitchhiked together. And we stopped in Mildura for a football game.
It's a totally unrelated
game.
question for you, but I've driven across the country many times and I never see hitchhikers in Australia. When
No.
did hitchhiking die off?
I don't know. I hitchhiked not all that long ago.
I think I've seen one hitchhiker in all my time in Australia.
15 or 20 years.
I hitchhiked in America.
I've certainly seen more there.
Anyway, so this is just people playing, and we slept there, and this is arriving. No, we were waiting for a lift there. And then, this is the Murray Valley Highway. Could you imagine being able to play cricket on the Murray Valley Highway today?
Wow, busier.
Yeah. And that's arriving down at post PMG. There we are. Well, how come they were put them in like that? That's late. That's not a good order. I should have really stood over. I've been in and out of hospital, and I've had assistants doing things, and they do as well as they can. But that's us travelling.
Wow.
See, it really helps having a title, doesn't it?
Well, it's just one of these sort of things that's, we'll just cancel that out.
There we are again. So there's some of the photos taken then on this little camera, and then...
So what were you shooting on then? Was that the Leica?
That's Leica.
Oh. Oh, get you back here.
Okay, let's get out of this.
Okay, we'll go back up to the top. We'll go back into images, all categories.
So this is some of my major bodies of work. I mean, we could continue here and choose a contemporary one. What's something recent? Oh, that was last year.
Oh, okay.
I came out of hospital and did this. So this is, again, looking at ripped crows, Nauru and Bannis. How in the name of heaven nice people like my neighbours can be in favour of this sort of stuff? I do not understand. Is this coming up in here?
That's right. You've got the long string.
Okay. Close Nauru and Manus. Yeah, but let them be alive. I love our cops, you know. This photo of the police and this female cop standing there with a hand on her hip and being very femme, you know. And they're sort of talking with people that they're supposed to be. I love this bloke here. I think he's American. What do you reckon?
Well, he might be.
Or African. But this bloke was going for it. He was one of the refos. There's another one. Brave enough to get up and talk. These were from the country. They came from, and they were quite happy for their names to be used and their photos. So I got permission for all of them, because you know sometimes these things end up in a ASIO file, which I've got one.
Mm-hmm.
I must see if they're still collecting on me.
So, for example,
I've got 80 pages.
So when you're out shooting recently, you know, public demonstrations and whatever, what are you there just purely documenting for your own purposes, or?
Oh no, send them off to the National Library.
Oh, okay then.
Oh yeah.
So they are becoming part of a public record then. That's
Oh,
really
yeah.
exciting.
Yeah, well, I've sold my whole life's work to the National Library of Australia. So they buy it. Every year I get $20,000, and every year they get a batch of stuff. So we've got a deal, but they've got all of my digital files, and they've got a record of all my negatives and trannies. And when I die, they get the trannies and negatives. But at the moment, they've got all the digital stuff.
Oh, well, that's really exciting. So how long have you had that relationship with the National Gallery?
Library.
Or National Library, sorry.
20 years.
20 years. Well, that's something you can be
I found I couldn't, look, I was already 60 when I started being a photographer. I didn't have a peer group that I went through school with, you know? And like I was a bit of an anachronism. And who was going to buy my stuff? So I had collectors. I mean, I think you bought a couple of things once. Then, what's the name from, that owns, Village, they own Village. What's the name? Kirby, yeah, the Kirbys. They've bought about 30 of my pieces, which is very nice. And a few other people have bought major collections, other than the library and so on. But no, I find that it's extremely difficult to sell photographs. I mean, I sort of hang my stuff every year at some show or another with Suzanne and Michael. Suzanne and Michael Silver. They run
Magnet Gallery, yes.
Magnet. Yeah, they run Magnet Gallery. And they're one of the few institutions that really spend a lot of energy on the documentary photography. They're really special. And I have a great respect for what they do. Anyway, oh, these were a nice young couple. He was out there. And this was a lovely family. They run a refugee action collective. So I think there's still organisations that work. And they were lovely, this mother and the two kids. I got their names as well. So anyone that's sort of highly identified, I got names.
Well, that's great. That'll be part of a permanent record then.
Yeah.
You're in a very unique position.
No, I like it that it's going there. So.
And you must be a very unthreatening person to them, you know, when you're out shooting. There's you're not, you know, it's not like some young whippersnapper shoving a camera in their face. I'm sure everybody'd be happy to have you take the picture.
Yeah. What's that one? Oh, this was fun. I arrived in Paris.
Let's give it a second. It'll
Yeah.
up here.
I arrived in Paris at the time of the Tiananmen Square incident. And here was the crowd. I mean, I had the taxi, I got my bag in, registered, went upstairs, grabbed my camera and came down. It was all outside the hotel, which was great. So, here we are, solidarity with the people of China. It was coming towards an end at the time. So that was great getting that. The end of the show.
Mm-hmm.
So
If we back up a little wee bit, as you were just saying, you know, that it's very, very difficult to sell a photograph.
As an artwork, yes.
Yes. Is it more difficult now than it used to be? What do you feel the reasons behind that are? Is it come back to this whole thing that everybody's a photographer and thus the photographic image has maybe been devalued, or?
No. Artwork in general sells by popularity, by name, and by fashion, you know. In a way, I'm past my use-by date.
I often think I am too, so.
Yeah, but you know what I'm getting at?
Yes.
So they're looking for that young person that's coming along, that's the bright thing, and they might sort of go crazy for him or her. And it depends on who's handling you and how you get your work out there, what sort of books you get written about you, or, you know, there's a whole stack of things that make you collectible. And it's just one of those things. What makes something collectible? I mean, there are somebody sees something and they love it. One amateur photographer, when I had the gallery, and he did a photograph of Dubrovnik. Now, he did some nice work. He wasn't a bad photographer at all, but it was his spare time thing. And but this particular photo of Dubrovnik, everybody loved. So I sold about four or five copies of it, you know? And there were more to be sold if I wanted to. And I actually have 2 copies of it. I think I gave one away. But coming back now, we're going to Cotswold Farm. This is very important for me because it's this first photograph here which I made in '82 after I'd started taking my classes. So it dates it was 1982 when I was learning at Photographer's Studies College. And it was great. You know, here was I running prestigious gallery, handling all sorts of photographers, talking to people like Cortez and so on and so forth. And I think I had a stick somewhere where it shouldn't have been. And within a day or two, because we used to just show what we'd shot, and then we'd discuss it and see where we could improve and what we should have done and so on. There was a lot of group work, which I thought was excellent. And I realised that I had nothing on anyone else. You know, we're all equal. So the moment you take the camera in your hand and you start to think about what you're doing and what you're creating, it all starts at the beginning, and you just got to learn how to be the camera. So after a while, when you are your own camera, and you're in harmony, and you can make what you think, and you're not worried about the technique because it's become habitual. I mean, I have trouble now because I'm blind, technically. So I don't see a lot of stuff. And a lot of the photos I'm taking now are half intuition. And I find it works better. I mean, blind photographers are great. Should all be blind occasionally. Learn how to work with the laws of chance. It's true that if you read someone like, oh dear, a number of different people have written about the laws of chance and how they work, and it's particularly popular in the last decade or so, because with the computer and the way in which things are not logical necessarily, and they're not controllable, the things that happen via the computer are quite strange. You know, sort of the capacity for mistake, the capacity for creating coincidentally is just so much greater now, because it's so much more sensitive as an instrument. The digital camera and the computer have so many potentials that we scarcely have developed and exploited. And I think that this is where a lot of art is going, and has been since, as I say, Duchamp. So this photo here was the first photo I took, which I recognised as being the sort of photograph that a photographer should take. That it wasn't just an accident, it was using my understanding of design and my understanding of the camera and so on and so forth, and being conscious of what I was making. So then I went back and I did a whole stack of plays. I went here about 3 years. This exhibition was 1986, so this is 82. So I bought a Hasselblad in the meantime, and so using that made a lot of difference. This is a later work when I went back years later. And this again is later again, but it's still the same sort of thing. It's looking at the way in which this particular set of fields creates form, and how the camera sort of, it's like Marilyn Monroe. This for me is my Marilyn Monroe. You can't take a bad photo of it. So there's the story about that. What is that? And also seals. Oh, I see. Oh, I can go to that one now. Oh, how clever.
It's your website.
Oh, I'm not technically as bright as I could be. Where are we going here?
I'm not sure. I don't think
Contact.
that's linked.
No, that's contact. Okay. All categories. We'll go there if you like. So there we are here. New Guinea Cross. This is where I started to play with things. I went to New Guinea to Amalgam, which is a festival in New Ireland, and I did these large photographs of this is the Malagan itself, this structure. And it's just put up there with posts at the back to hold it. There's no back to it. And this is all covered in reeds, which have been woven. And then these are different mats that have been produced. And what I was looking at was the concept of the fact that this is a festival that goes way back, at least 500, maybe 1,000 years. And this is the way in which they celebrate their time, and they mourn their father who died, and they respect the traditions that exist there. And then I thought, but in the meantime they've all become Christianized. So I got hold of a Christ and I put it on the Malagan, and was integrating those two religions. And I think that with nearly all of us, I mean, if you look at an Irish Catholic in Australia and look at an Irish Catholic in Ireland, they'd be very different. You know, the same would be for an Australian Jew as compared to an Israeli Jew. Whatever religion it is, we all change when we come to a new country. Well, this new island, as was New Guinea, was Christianized, and so the figure of Christ becomes sort of a symbol of that Christianization. And in the meantime, you've got, I projected the Christ figure. I had the Christ figure on a black velvet background, and then projected these images onto it. And so we had the two amalgamated. Now, with Photoshop, these days you can do it so easily. So this is very crude compared to what you can do with Photoshop. So there's the blood of the pig all over Christ. I think I did this before we had the guy who did the Piss Christ.
Oh, okay.
I
can't remember his name, but I've heard of it.
Piss Christ. He became quite famous because he pissed all over a Christ figure, and he called it Piss Christ.
I guess that brings up this other thing that we talk about, you know, and the marketability about this and fame and whatever, controversy. Yeah. Controversy plays a very big role, you know, and some people just create it, and it can do wonders for their career. So
this has been sort of quietly done, and nobody's really known about it to talk about.
So when you were putting these together, so you've got the Christ figure on the black. So now, you've gone off to Papua New Guinea and you've got the pictures. And now, are you doing the camera compositing? That's done at home, or were you doing that in the field as well?
No. This is done when I come home.
Okay then.
Took me a while to think about it.
Okay. And you were using an actual projector?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a projector. There's another one, that's the warrior Christ.
There's an interesting style that people are using now. They are using old projectors or lenses and modified, and they're actually flashing a slide into the scene. And they're doing this compositing in camera in the real world. I haven't had a chance to play with it. I did a couple of them.
It'd be fun to see. I'd love to see one.
Yeah, it's really bizarre.
So here we are again, and again I've put the Christ figure there with all the pigs being laid out. It's just me playing. There's the pig being burnt. They burn off the hair and the skin, get that nice and crispy. And again, I put Christ in the fire. So they're just ideas that we have.
I don't think any of those are active.
No, I don't think so.
We'll go back to the previous page. There we go.
Okay. This is the case of working for beauty. I took these photographs and I decided that I needed to make them very beautiful. I went to he's a very good printer, and he does a lot of prints, and he's out. Anyway, so I went to, might have his name here as the printer. I should. Where is he? Oh, I didn't put his name there, aren't I naughty? Anyway, so the story about these is that when I took them, I was aware of their Japanesey feel. And what I needed to get was the sand articulated and this lovely sense of line. And I went to this printer and said, I would like that done. And we worked on it, and after a while we got it. And what we did is we found this origami paper, which is absolutely amazing. It's made from mulberries, a mulberry tree, and it has so much tactile you can put one finger here, you know, and you can just hold it, and it's almost flat. It's so strong. It's so beautiful. And so that's that. And these are different designs that are very similar. But so that's just down on the beach. Okay.
Should we go back to the previous page?
Yep.
There you go.
There's another one. This is a show I had at oh, right. This is a show I had at MGA, Monash Gallery of Art. And the other one was also at Monash Gallery of Art. And these are using the wide lux camera, which I just love. I think it's one of the best cameras you can use. We were talking about the laws of chance and chance. The wide lux, you really can't quite predict what you're doing with it because you actually can't see in the viewfinder exactly the full width because it goes around the corner and compresses space. So you're getting 160 degrees on a curve, but of course it comes out otherwise. So with this
I'll
particular
just explain
image,
a little bit more. For those who not familiar, the wide lux camera is a swinging optical design, so it's a panoramic camera, and because it swings in time, it's quite possible that what you thought was going to be at the end of the frame when you click the shutter might very well have changed. There can be temporal distortion in these moving optical cameras, and because, of course, my main interest in photography has been panoramic, I'm a big fan of these things. I've never owned one. We don't have a wide lux in the museum, but we have a Russian copy.
have you? I've got one.
There's Horizon out there, but they're very interesting cameras.
I'll have to leave it to you.
I was actually about to ask whether you shot them on. I thought you might have had a Hasselblad X-Pan or something, but it was the
no,
wide
this
lux.
is the wide lux, which I love because of the, and particularly, I mean, it's basically designed to use as a horizontal camera. And if you use it on tripod horizontally, you can kind of look around corners a bit and get it a little bit more. But I use it handheld, and I sometimes twist it, and I sometimes just will do that as compared to having it square to the image. I might just tilt it a bit, or I might do that. And I play with it, and sometimes it gives you some very interesting elements.
Well, obviously, if you're moving it during its exposure, and if you're in a little lower light, it's a little longer exposure, you can do some very creative things with it.
Yeah, I think I've done that too.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's all a matter of playing.
Were you using the wide lux in one of the protest pictures earlier? You showed us one that I think was from the I'm not sure which one. Yeah, I thought I saw a panorama in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the wide lux.
No, that was using, I think it was using my phone.
Oh, was it your phone? Okay.
I think so.
A lot of what the wide lux does with analog film can be kind of simulated using the panoramic mode on your phone. But what your phone does when you're shooting that kind of sweet
compositing
panorama,
it.
It's producing little digital slices and putting it together. So it can kind of have a pixelated look, but it can be very artistic. Some neat little accidents happen with these things.
Well, everybody can use one. I mean, it works as a composite. So it's a bit of fun. I used to be a skier, and I lived up at Mount Buller for some time. So it's a place I knew well. This is basically me talking about the road. This one here, strangely enough, I was with some Aboriginal people at the time, and see this little hole there?
Oh yes.
I didn't see that, and one of the guys pointed it out to me and said, "There's a spider's hole," and so I took the photo of it, and there are some very interesting dynamics here, particularly my shoe, which of course is bad news. Shouldn't have done that. But still, I don't care. And so that's very much the desert road, isn't it? And here, these two are Toorak. They're both in Toorak, and this one here is down on the Mornington Peninsula. And of course this is age, three aspects of age: the old fruit trees, the old fence, and the old tree. And here, this is standing up on here, and this was where Tallaringa Springs, the Great Victorian Desert. When was that? 91, yeah. I went there with 40 other women, and we were doing research for the Museum of South Australia, and picking up stuff. But this was our camp, and yeah. So there's the tent, and a chair, and a little ladder.
So you were standing on the ladder?
Yep.
Yeah, excellent.
Just playing.
When's the last time you used the wide lux?
A while ago now. I must get back to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's certainly a camera I always wanted to shoot on. I've certainly seen an awful lot of works from them. It's very interesting what the wide lux is shooting, technically speaking, is a
Come over
cylindrical
one day and we'll
panorama.
play.
Yeah.
It'll be fun.
We're uniquely positioned that we can still process the film from any of these oddball cameras here at Michael's. There's not a lot of places you can drop the stuff off at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's great.
Well, I wanted to thank you so much for joining us and just having a wide and varied conversation. And it's just interesting to hear your points of view on all these things and to see some of these works. And it's just a fascinating story that you've shared with us. And it's just been a pleasure. And yes, I would love to go shooting with you. I think it would be really enjoyable.
Yeah. Actually, one of my, where is it? All categories. I missed out on road kills. Yes, this is an important body of work too. Here.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that yet. That's right.
Okay. So this is roadkill. The thing about any body of work, whether it's a portrait, whether it's roadkills or whatever it is, when I first started, I was photographing, you know, the animal going back into the earth, you know, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, with that whole philosophy. And you have to, I believe, the way I work and the way I think, is that you've got to have the story, but the story has to be something that holds. Now, with the roadkill, eventually what I decided to do was to always look for the entire animal, to show that this was a beautiful creature that was dead. And in many cases, like this dog, the legs are too stiff and so on and so forth, but when you first see it, it almost looks as though it's sleeping. And for me, I wanted then to tell the story that way, but then these, the cat and the dog and the fox, those two, I created them because I wanted them large, and my enlarger wouldn't let me easily do something that was 2024. No, it wasn't 2024. It was 2436, I think I made these. And so what I did with these is I shot them all using a 35mm camera, and then I put them together so that I was able then to get a large photograph.
Now, were you putting those together with your final prints?
Yeah, they're the final prints.
Final prints.
It's a final print.
Okay. So a photo was it kind of like what David Hockney used to do?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, everybody's done it at some stage, and I did it quite a few times, you know, sort of putting more than one image together to make a larger image. is it's a way of solving that problem. And so these actually were made for a major exhibition that toured New South Wales. But these ones here, for instance, are the kangaroo, but you can see how there's that sense of them being entire. You know, they're not, okay, some. See that one, you could scarcely know it was dead. So there's the poor old kangaroo paw.
Well,
there we are.
It's a topic I cover as well.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I take pictures of roadkill whenever I find it.
Yeah. Well, it can be a bit smelly and fly-blitten, can't it?
Well, in Australia...
What do you aim for then? The entire animal, or do you get the others as well?
For me, it's documenting what I've seen. And I find it so hard to find the animals alive in Australia that I normally just find them dead at the side of the road. So I think I've spotted something interesting, and I pull over, and next thing I know, I'm taking pictures of roadkill. And sometimes it's been the animals I've hit.
Oh dear.
Yeah, well, that's part of life in Australia. Sometimes animals run out in front of you.
Absolutely, it's hard to miss them.
Yeah, well, I kind of think kangaroos actually want to dodge you. They always try to hit you.
Anyway, so when you aim at photographing a dead animal, what would make you want to then show it, you know, or put it in a book or whatever it is, as compared to, you know, what are you looking for in the dead animals? Have you created a criteria for yourself?
No, not really. And it's just been when I travel, I'm always on the lookout for animals because I'm fascinated and I enjoy them. And it just turns out you find more dead ones than you find live ones. Usually the live ones are moving pretty quick and they get away from you. So by force of necessity, I pull over and I take pictures of the dead ones. I don't really show them to anybody.
No?
It's not really been part of it, but it's just one of the things I document.
Yeah.
And
so what are the other things you document?
well, I document the change in cities. I like to shoot panoramas. That's been my main sort of technical area of photography for the last, I don't know, 15 or so years. And I'd like to go back to the same location and try to compose the exact same picture where only the subject has changed. And I often like to find other individuals who've come before me and done the same thing. So I follow the work of other panoramic photographers and I go and recreate their pictures, you know, 10, 20, maybe even 100 years later. And so that I can do this A-B comparison so that I can take a look at the change, because that's what I'm fascinated by. So
That sounds good.
I can't say there's any commercial ramifications for it, but I find it enjoyable. And because I'm a little old, getting a little older now, I can go back to some of the same places that I shot, much like you've revisited many of your locations, because it's interesting to see how they change.
It is.
Yeah. And obviously, when you're shooting roadkill, sometimes there's lots of different, if you want to shoot kangaroos, for example, on a stretch of the Nullarbor, you can find, within walking distance, a lot of different states of decay, just in the same field of view almost.
Absolutely.
And there's no shortage of dead kangaroos out there. Anyway.
Okay.
Well, that's an amazing body of work. You know, you've covered on so many different areas and lots of different pieces of technology. You've embraced digital, and you've got a very keen understanding of what makes an image. And I love it. I love the way you analyze them, and I love the enjoyment that you get out of them, because of course that's what it's all about. So when we started off our conversation, and you said you know, the use by date corollary for, you know, is photography art, you know, and I think you've clearly shown that you've been able to produce it, you're able to criticize it, you're able to know it when you see it, and of course love it. And of course that love is very important, and it really comes that comes flying out of you. So I'm really, it was wonderful to have a chance to sit down and talk with you, Joyce.
I really enjoyed it. Thank
and hopefully
you.
we'll have some more.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get out and do some shooting. So,
that'd be good. We'll let you use my wide legs.
Oh, I'd love to. So we really hope that you enjoyed our conversation, somewhat varied, somewhat a little bit rambling, but that's the way we are. You know, we're just talking about photography. And we look forward to seeing you in some of our future interviews coming up. So take care, and we'll see you next time.